The rain fell in sheets that night, washing away evidence and hope alike. By the time Mark Winters found Officer Sarah Chen bleeding out in that abandoned warehouse, the doctors would later say she had less than 20 minutes to live. What happened in the hours, days, and months that followed would not only save her life but transform an entire police department, challenge decades of procedure, and forge an unbreakable bond between a broken family and a wounded protector. If you think you know where this story is going, I promise you don't. Stay with me until the end. It's worth every minute, and if this story moves you like it's moved thousands of others, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more extraordinary true stories that remind us what it means to be human. Mark Winters hadn't slept properly in 3 years, not since his wife's death left him raising their daughter alone. That rainy Tuesday in October, he was working late again, cutting through the industrial district on his way home from his second job. He almost didn't stop when he saw the faint flicker of emergency lights reflecting off puddles near the old Westbrook paper mill. Almost. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like jagged teeth. Mark pulled over, telling himself he was just being paranoid, that someone had probably just forgotten to turn off their hazards. But something felt wrong. He'd learned to trust that feeling since becoming a single parent, that sixth sense that kept his daughter Emma safe. The police cruiser sat empty, driver's door ajar, radio crackling with unanswered calls. Mark approached cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Only the steady drumming of rain answered. He followed a trail of disturbed gravel toward the warehouse entrance. That's when he heard it, a faint groan carried on the wind. Inside the cavernous building, his flashlight beam cut through darkness until it found her, a female officer crumpled against a concrete pillar, one hand pressed to her abdomen where dark blood seeped between her fingers. "Oh God," Mark whispered, rushing to her side. Her nameplate read, Chen. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused with shock. "Radio," she managed, her voice barely audible. "They took my radio." Mark pulled out his phone. No signal. The officer's breathing grew more labored. "I need to get you out of here," he said, already calculating how to move her without causing more damage. "Can't," she gasped. "They might still be watching. Backup, coming." But Mark could see the truth in her fading eyes. Backup might be coming, but not soon enough. Whatever had happened here, whatever she had stumbled upon, had left her with a gunshot wound that was killing her by the minute. "I'm sorry, Officer Chen, but we don't have time to wait." With that, Mark made a decision that would later be scrutinized by the entire police force, praised by medical professionals, and ultimately change department protocol forever. Sarah Chen had joined the police force against her parents' wishes. The daughter of Chinese immigrants who had sacrificed everything for her education, they had envisioned her becoming a doctor or lawyer, not putting her life on the line daily in a profession that still sometimes viewed her as an outsider. But Sarah had been drawn to service since childhood, and at 32, she had finally made detective after years of exemplary work. That night, she had been following a lead on a series of warehouse thefts, nothing that should have turned deadly. But she'd stumbled upon something much bigger, a major drug operation with connections that reached into the department itself. When she'd called it in, her location had been compromised by someone on the inside. The ambush had been quick and professional. They'd taken her weapon, radio, and left her to die slowly, a warning to others who might get too close to the truth. As Mark carried her to his car, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. The hospital was 15 minutes away in good weather. Tonight, with the storm, it might as well have been on another continent. "Stay with me, Officer Chen," Mark said, driving as fast as he dared on the slick roads. "Tell me about yourself. You got family?" "Parents," she murmured. "Sister in Seattle." "I've got a daughter," Mark said, desperate to keep her talking. "Emma. She's 8. Smart as a whip and twice as sharp. Wants to be a police officer, actually." Sarah's laugh turned into a cough that sprayed blood onto the dashboard. Tell her, find another dream. You can tell her yourself, Mark insisted, taking a turn too sharply. What's your first name? Sarah, she whispered. Well, Sarah, I'm Mark. And I'm not letting you die in my car tonight. What Mark didn't know then was that Sarah Chen had information that could bring down not just a drug ring but expose corruption that had festered in the department for years. What Sarah didn't know was that Mark Winters had once been a combat medic before civilian life and tragedy had turned him into an overworked single father just trying to stay afloat. When they arrived at St. Mary's Hospital, Sarah had no pulse. The emergency team worked frantically while Mark stood by, his clothes soaked with rain and blood. He answered their questions mechanically. No, he didn't know her personally. Yes, he found her at the old paper mill. No, he hadn't seen who shot her. Hours later, a grim-faced doctor approached him in the waiting room. Mr. Winters? Officer Chen is stable, but critical. If you hadn't applied that makeshift pressure bandage, if you'd waited for backup or followed standard civilian protocol, she wouldn't have made it. You saved her life tonight. Mark nodded numbly, thinking of Emma waiting at home with the teenage neighbor he paid to watch her when he worked late. Can I see her? She's unconscious. And there are officers who want to speak with you. The officers who questioned Mark that night were professional but suspicious. Why was he in that area? How did he happen to find her? Why take matters into his own hands instead of calling 911? Behind their questions lurked an unspoken concern. Was this civilian somehow involved? Captain James Reynolds, a 20-year veteran with hard eyes and a reputation for by-the-book leadership, was particularly skeptical. You understand how this looks, Mr. Winters. Officer Chen was investigating a sensitive case. She's shot, her service weapon missing, and a random civilian just happens to find her and bring her in? I understand how it looks, Mark replied evenly. But that's what happened. I saw the lights, I found her, I brought her here. That's it. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a formal statement. Mark checked his watch, 3:17 a.m. I have to take my daughter to school in 4 hours. Something in Reynolds' expression shifted slightly. Bring her to the station after. We'll have someone watch her while we talk. As Mark finally drove home, exhaustion settling into his bones, he had no idea that his life had just become entangled with a department in crisis, a wounded officer with dangerous knowledge, and a conspiracy that would test everything he thought he knew about justice, family, and second chances. Emma was already awake when Mark got home, sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, her dark hair a tangled mess around her worried face. Mrs. Patel from next door dozed on the couch. Daddy! Where were you? Mrs. Patel said you called but I was already asleep and, she stopped, noticing the blood on his clothes. Are you hurt? Mark knelt before his daughter, taking her small hands in his. No, sweetheart. I'm fine. I had to help someone who was hurt, that's all. Like when you were a soldier doctor? Mark smiled sadly. He rarely spoke about his time as a combat medic, but Emma treasured the few stories he'd shared. Something like that. Now, how about you help me make breakfast while I grab a quick shower? As he stood under the hot water, watching pink swirls disappear down the drain, Mark couldn't shake the image of Sarah Chen's face, pale and determined even as life drained from her. He'd seen that look before, in another life, on other faces. People fighting to stay alive against impossible odds. Some made it. Many didn't. He wondered if she would remember him when she woke up. If she would recover fully. If whoever shot her would try again. He didn't wonder if he'd see her again. In a city this size, their paths had crossed once by chance. Lightning rarely struck twice. Mark was wrong about that, as he would soon discover. Lightning was about to strike not just twice, but repeatedly, in ways that would illuminate the darkest corners of both their lives. After dropping Emma at school with promises to pick her up on time, promises he wasn't sure he could keep given the police station visit ahead, Mark drove downtown to the precinct. The building was older than most in the city, all imposing stone and narrow windows. Inside, it hummed with the controlled chaos of any police station, phones ringing, officers moving between desks, the smell of bad coffee and tension in the air. Captain Reynolds met him in the lobby. "Mr. Winters. Follow me." They passed through a security checkpoint and down a hallway lined with photos of officers, some in memoriam, others celebrating achievements. Mark wondered if Sarah Chen's face would end up on this wall, and in which category. The interview room was small and windowless. A detective named Morales joined them, her expression unreadable as she set up a recording device. "Just tell us exactly what happened," Reynolds said. "From the beginning." Mark recounted the events of the previous night in detail, his drive home, spotting the cruiser, finding Officer Chen, the decision to transport her himself. "You said you applied a pressure bandage," Morales noted. "Where'd you learn that?" "I was a combat medic. 2 tours in Afghanistan." Reynolds and Morales exchanged glances. "That wasn't in your file," Reynolds said. "You have a file on me?" "We ran a background check." "Standard procedure." Mark leaned forward. "Then you know I have no criminal record. I pay my taxes. I work 2 jobs to support my daughter after my wife died. I found an injured officer and I helped her. That's all there is to this story." Reynolds studied him for a long moment. "Maybe. Maybe not. Officer Chen was investigating something sensitive. Until we know exactly what happened to her, everyone connected to this case is under scrutiny. I'm not connected to this case. I'm a bystander who helped. A bystander with medical training who just happened to be in an industrial zone at midnight?" Mark felt his patience thinning. "I work at Harmon's auto shop until 11. It's a shortcut home." The questioning continued for another hour, circling back to the same points. By the end, Mark was exhausted and increasingly worried about what he'd gotten himself into. As he was leaving, Reynolds stopped him. "One more thing, Mr. Winters. Until this investigation is complete, don't leave town. We may have more questions." In the lobby, Mark was surprised to find Emma waiting, sitting next to a young officer who was showing her his badge. "Daddy," she called, jumping up. "Officer Luis let me try on his hat." Mark checked his watch in confusion. "Emma? Why aren't you in school?" "It's almost 3, Dad," she said, her smile fading. "School's been out for an hour. Mrs. Patel brought me here because you weren't answering your phone." Mark closed his eyes briefly. He'd lost track of time completely. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." The young officer, Luis, stood up. "No problem, sir. She's been telling me all about how she wants to be a police officer someday." Emma beamed. "I told him about the lady you saved last night. He says she's a detective and she's really brave." Mark shot a questioning look at Luis, who shrugged apologetically. "Word gets around fast here. What you did was pretty amazing, sir." As they walked to the car, Emma chattered excitedly. "Can we visit her? The police lady? I want to meet a real lady detective. She's very sick, Emma. She needs to rest. But when she's better. Please." Mark helped her buckle her seatbelt, buying time before answering. "We'll see." That night, after Emma was asleep, Mark sat at his kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, researching Sarah Chen. There wasn't much, a few mentions in local news articles about cases she'd worked, a commendation 2 years ago for bravery during a hostage situation. Nothing that explained why someone would want her dead. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Winters? This is Nurse Abernathy from St. Mary's. You're listed as the emergency contact for Sarah Chen." Mark frowned. There must be some mistake. I barely know her. Sir, she specifically asked for you. She's awake and insisting on speaking with you. She says it's urgent. Mark glanced at Emma's bedroom door. I can't leave my daughter alone. She was quite adamant, sir. Said to tell you it's about what happened at the warehouse. That you might be in danger. A chill ran through Mark. Give me 30 minutes. After calling Mrs. Patel to watch Emma, Mark drove through the quiet streets to St. Mary's, his mind racing. Why would Sarah Chen list him as an emergency contact? What could she possibly need to tell him that couldn't wait until morning? The hospital corridors were dimly lit, the night shift staff moving quietly between rooms. 2 uniformed officers stood outside a room at the end of the hall. They straightened as Mark approached. I'm here to see Sarah Chen, he said. She asked for me. One officer checked a list. Mark Winters? ID please. After verifying his identity, they let him pass with a warning, 5 minutes. She needs rest. Sarah Chen looked smaller in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines monitoring her vital signs. Her skin was ashen against the white sheets, but her eyes were alert and focused as they met his. You came, she said, her voice hoarse. You listed me as your emergency contact. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Temporary measure. Needed to talk to you without department interference. Mark moved closer to the bed. The nurse said I might be in danger. Sarah glanced toward the door before continuing in a lower voice. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Understood? Mark nodded slowly. The night you found me, I wasn't just following up on warehouse thefts. I was meeting an informant who had evidence of officers working with the Castillo cartel. Protecting shipments, tipping off dealers about raids, making evidence disappear. Corrupt cops, Mark said. And they found out. Someone leaked my location. Only 5 people knew where I was going that night. Her hand tightened on the sheet. I don't know who I can trust anymore. Why tell me this? I'm not a cop. Because you saved my life when you had no reason to. Because you're not part of the department. And because now you're involved whether you want to be or not. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Involved how? The men who shot me saw your car. They might have gotten your plate number. If they think you know something. She didn't need to finish the thought. I have a daughter, Mark said, his voice tight. I know. That's why I'm warning you. Be careful. Watch for anything unusual. And if something happens, don't go to the police. Come to me. You're in no condition to help anyone right now. Sarah's eyes flashed with determination. I've been building this case for months. I have resources, people I trust outside the department. I can protect you and your daughter, but only if you trust me too. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Time's up. Mark stood, his mind reeling. What am I supposed to do now? Live your life. Act normal. I'll contact you when I'm discharged. She hesitated, then added, thank you. For finding me. For bringing me here. As Mark walked back to his car, the weight of Sarah's words settled over him like a shroud. He had saved her on instinct, without thinking of consequences. Now those consequences were threatening to engulf not just him, but Emma too. He checked his rearview mirror repeatedly on the drive home, suddenly aware of every car that stayed behind him for more than a few blocks. By the time he reached his modest house in the suburbs, his nerves were frayed. Mrs. Patel was dozing in his living room again. He thanked her and locked the door behind her, then checked every window and door in the house before finally collapsing onto his couch. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Change your routine. Vary your routes. Trust no one until you hear from me again. SC. Mark stared at the ceiling, wondering how his act of compassion had led him here, to this moment of fear and uncertainty. He thought of Emma, sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that her world might be in danger because of his choices. "What have I gotten us into?" he whispered to the empty room. The answer came in the form of a car slowly cruising past his house, its headlights off, at 3 in the morning. Mark didn't sleep that night. He sat